Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
All right, boys and girls, welcome back to the PROCON podcast. As you have seen, we had the introductions and we are going to record some project podcasts as well. But also from our educational center, we want to give you an insight in how to effectively train project control planners. My guest for today, Stefan Hollak, Manager Caddy. You all have met from the podcast with the CEO of PMI. Stefan, together we are going to discuss, and we built this blog from the Head of Project Planning series, yes. Where we are going to discuss how to effectively train project controls planners. At the first page, there is people, processes, and tools. All the same, or who is the most important in that threesome?
Yeah, our philosophy is that always people come first. People are by far the most important actually from the three. You can have the best tools, all processes are in place, but if you don't have the people that can use the tools and that know what processes are in place and that wants to follow the processes, you actually don't have nothing. You can, for instance, give me the best tools. You can give me a Formula One car, but I wouldn't even be able to start it. Okay. So without having the skills, without having Max Verstappen, the person who can drive it, you're actually, you could have better given me a bicycle. Yeah.
But is Max the best because he's trained properly, or because he's born with the right talent, or in project controls? Can everybody train to be a project planner?
Well, I think you should have some kind of affection with numbers, with data analysis.
Because it's a science at the end.
Yeah, project controls is a field that really analyzes data and transforms it into information. And to do that, you need to get trained in the field of project controls. You need to know what is it, what can we do with it, and then what are the tools, etc., etc. So yes, if you like the field, I think you can be trained in project controls. Yeah.
Yeah, so you should have this analytical approach, I see, and I think I heard you say you should have a Discovery Channel enthusiastic. You want to see how projects are built, but you also say you need to start with the basics.
Yeah. Project controls, some people directly make the step to a tooling and say, okay, project controls, that's Primavera, Oracle Primavera. You need to know the tool and you need to have a course to know the buttons, and then you are a project controls engineer. But actually, we think, or we believe, there's more to that. You need to know the basics of project controls. You need to get the foundation. Yeah. What are the definitions in project controls to get this? Well, last time I also talked about T-shaped professionals, to get this basic knowledge about the field and then get the specialization in the tooling, in risk, cost, or whatever you're specializing on. But first you need to know some basics. For instance, what is the difference between a management reserve, contingency, and the float? If you don't know the basics, then it's no use to go any deeper, any further.
And this is actually the first course on the Primaned Academy. It's the basics of the principles, I think it's called in the Project Academy. The principles you're learning. What is what? Are there discussions in the field on what's the difference between float and reserve, etc.?
Yes, for sure. Especially that one actually. Who owns the float is one that is really difficult, because the owner thinks I own the float because, well, you got the job from me because you finish on this day, and the rest of the time is my time.
Yep.
But the contractor actually says, no, I own the float because I reserved this float for all the risks that might occur.
Yeah. So it's like a semantic discussion on what's what, and there's a real, because if it's an analytical approach, there should be one answer which is actually true. That's what you learn in this basic training. So so that's a day of training, I think, half a day training. And are we then going into the tool, because everybody wants to steer and push the buttons, of course?
Yes, almost there. But no, the second step, the second day, we normally go into the details of the scheduling tool without touching it. So we go into the details of critical path methods and the best practices of scheduling. Because you need to know what does Primavera or Microsoft Projects or Oracle Primavera Cloud, what does it do when I, for instance, touch the schedule button? What does it calculate, and how does it work with the constraints? Or how does leveling work? We literally sometimes get a question. People call our support center and they ask us, when I press schedule, my schedule will show at the end date of the 1st of April.
Yep.
But my colleague is showing, is having the same schedule, also presses F9, and then it's April 5th. So what's wrong? Well, the first thing we ask then, as a response, is did you calculate? What is the correct answer?
Yep.
And most of the time, people don't know. Actually, it's a sort of black box. They don't know what should be the answer. They just press F9 and they see what happens. So you should know what is Primavera doing. Why is he doing that? Because then you know how to schedule. There's a difference between being a scheduler and being a good scheduler. Yeah,
but we people can't schedule or calculate 100,000 fields. But in basics, you're saying you need to know what the theory is about. 3 + 3 is 6 in basics, and if you do it 100,000 times, Primavera or every other scheduling tool can do it faster, more precise, more brain power at the machine, for example. But you really should know by heart. Are you calculating that in that course as well? Do you get a blank sheet and a pen and a paper and a pencil?
Yes. Actually, we are going to calculate the same thing that Primavera does for us.
Yep.
We're going to calculate it one time ourselves. And hopefully after that you never need to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Unless we have a full blackout, no electricity, then you need to get the pencil and the paper again. But indeed, we're going to calculate that. But also, we're going to calculate what happens when you press leveling.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between scheduling and leveling. And with the leveling, it's something that's very important. What thresholds, what requirements you give to the tool that he uses to level. The leveling is just a calculation, but the scheduler, the scheduling engineer, is the one that defines what is important. What are my priorities for leveling? So that's also something you really learn in the course.
Because you need to configure those rules and constraints and priorities, and then the machine is doing it faster. But
exactly, yeah.
Who makes the decision? Is it the scheduler? What's important, or does Primavera makes the decision?
Well, the organization, but for sure not the tool. No.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not a magic. It's not the holy grail for all your leveling problems.
Yeah, it's still a tool that helps you.
Yeah.
It calculates things, but you should know how to operate it.
Yeah, I talk a lot with the project engineers on the projects on the podcast as well, and they always say to me, I use leveling as an inspiration, and then I make the scheduling myself. Is that something you can recognize?
Yeah, it's a sort of scenario leveling. So you even try it with different scenarios, and you say, okay, what happens when I adjust my leveling priorities a bit.
Yeah. And is it to get the Fingerspitzengefühl where the challenges are in the project, or where the constraints are, or where your bottleneck is? Is that what if I change the resource priority, then I know that we need more priority one people, for example. Is that a little bit where we should think on this approach?
Yes. I think it's basically about there are so many. It's about finding the needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
There are so many options. And the scheduling tool is just giving you one of the options, and it helps you a lot. You don't need to look at every straw to see if it's a needle, but it doesn't know what is your needle. So it gives you the best options with the
parameters you entered.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I learned how to calculate. I learned scheduling, leveling, etc. Time for the tooling?
Yes, now it's time for the tooling.
It's time for the tooling. So Primavera, Primaned Academy at the end is doing a lot of scheduling tools with some more best of breed than the others. Tell me something more about the tool training. What's the Primavera tool training, for example, or the other ones?
Yeah, so we have indeed Primavera, Oracle Primavera, P6 tool training, also Microsoft projects.
Yep.
We're actually developing also an Oracle Primavera Cloud tool training, which will become available start next year.
Yep.
With those three are actually the best of breed, to our opinion, in scheduling.
Yep. Because there are a lot of scheduling tools in the world.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can. There are much more scheduling tools. Some better than others. But we think those have the basics to make a good schedule.
Yeah. Okay. Is it hands-on? Are we touching the buttons, or are we looking at slides, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's not like we show you all the buttons and explain you what it does. You're really going to work with a group together with different exercises, case studies, and we walk through all essential things you need to know to schedule a project. So all the basic knowledge you need to know is in the training.
Yep.
Primavera training is a bit longer than a Microsoft project training, because Primavera is at start a bit more difficult maybe, but also you can do a bit more with it. It's more comprehensive. It's
also longer in existence, I think, as Microsoft projects.
Yeah.
So
Microsoft is getting there, but it's not.
Yeah, they don't have the history like Oracle Primavera has. Okay, so this foundation, this tool training, then the people are going home or to their organizations. I compare it with if I get my driver's license and I actually did the exams, and then I go home and I can drive my mother's car probably the first days. My parents told me, you're going to learn how to drive when you actually are on the road. So not from the isolated case study. You're going to learn how to schedule. Yeah. But you need to bring this into practice in your organization.
Yes, and it also depends in which country you drive, which rules you need to obey. Because if you're in England, it's better to switch to the other side of the road, for instance. So it's really dependent on your company, which scheduling rules, which project controls rules there are. So I think the next step is to look at the processes. How are we scheduling? What are we doing with our baseline, with our data date? It's important that not every scheduling engineer, not every project manager has its own rules. So you should somehow standardize, optimize to get insight on portfolio level also. Yeah. Because there's this pyramid that I sometimes show in my trainings, or actually always show in the introduction training, the project controls. Where the strategy is on top, and then there's this enterprise portfolio management level.
Yep.
And that's actually where the PMO, the project management organization, defines, how are we standardizing our processes to be able to compare projects and make the right decisions on strategic level.
Okay. The same as if we agree all to drive on the left, it will be less messy than half is going to do left and right together.
Yeah.
So the process, and is that on a Is that on an application, on a tooling process, or is it the same as in people, processes, tool? Those three should be aligned in together.
Yes, you should indeed connect those. So who should give what information to whom in the organization, but also what should be done in the tooling. So it's about updating projects, but it's also about reporting who should be informed, who should be consulted, the Raki models that you have in the processes. That's actually, you come home with your tool knowledge, but then you should apply it in your organization and see, okay, how can we standardize things and optimize things?
Yeah. And is that industry specific, or is that organizational specific, or do you see a mix of those all together?
It is a bit dependent on the industry, but actually in project controls we have some best practices on how those typical processes should go. Yeah, and that's also where we help a lot in the organizations, because we don't only give trainings as a trainer, but we are always active in the field to help organizations increase their maturity level on project controls, or try to implement the tooling in their processes. Yep. So we can help there with aligning actually the processes with the tools and the people.
Yeah, because for the listeners who don't know, Primaned Academy is one of the business units within the Primonet family, let me call it that way, where you also have the software, where we're talking about Oracle Primavera. Yeah. We have a consulting firm who helps implementing application processes and business processes. And at the end, we have a staffing agency where we actually staff out experienced scheduling engineers to help these projects on the knowledge we have built within the company. But you're saying there is a standard way of doing a project, and you just need to fine-tune it. So 80-90% is the same if you are contractor A or contractor B, to be, for example. But one contractor does it a little bit different because it's specialized in some projects or that kind of thing. But there are some things like scheduling best practices. Yes. Okay. Projects are getting bigger. We see if I drive to my house, I see a lot of new builds at the end of the road. When I talk to customers and projects, they say, well, what we used to call a big project 5 years ago is a small project nowadays. I think the consolidation in contractors, in organizations, and projects are becoming more complex. The world is getting crowdier. What we're also seeing from a technology point of view, I think, is that the rise in big data is there. All the rail tracks are full of sensors. Everything is 4D, BIM, etc. How are people steering this much information? Because, well, I hope they are not all looking at the Gantt chart in Primavera. What's the output, for example, from a scheduler? What does he need to deliver to who, and what does he do with it?
Yeah, it's getting more and more complicated, and that's actually also the role of a project controls engineer, because there are more than one project, and every project is getting more and more, is resulting in more and more data. Yep. So it's about transforming those data, gather it, transform it, analyze it, and then show it maybe in some kind of report, in a dashboard to the right stakeholders. Yep. So you're really the middleman. Yeah. In gathering all
translator.
The data. You translate it, you analyze it, and then you look at what information is important for which stakeholder. Yeah. And then you create the dashboards that are necessary for communicating that information. Yeah,
but then everybody should follow the same data input, for example, because if you don't have the same data for everybody, well, they can't compare it.
Yeah, that's really important, because in the end, the management is only looking at this dashboard that they really like, because they see clearly, okay, what's happening, but they lose the feeling with the input. Yeah. And garbage in is garbage out. We know the saying, but it's really true, because if you put garbage in, a dashboard is just a nice way to show the garbage, but it's still garbage. So it's really important as a project control engineer to to always be the one to make sure that the data in is standardized. You're not comparing apples and oranges, and that it's transformed to also data that you can use to look forward, to forecast, and to take action.
But that's a lot of responsibility on validating this data, because probably he will get it from somebody else. He's not gathering the data, for example, himself. So is the role of the scheduler and the planning engineer, is that changing in these?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, it is because I think nowadays digitalization is getting bigger. So the project controls engineer, the new generation is more
tech savvy.
It's more familiar with the new tooling, and there are a lot of BI tools that can help in doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't even live without this digitalization anymore to make this work easy and
because
and
I
more
can't
control.
interpret the weather model, but I can look at my iPhone to see if it's going to rain in 30 minutes probably, because I get the satellite images on my iPhone.
Yeah, it's the same concept. It's a tool. You should have the skilled people to use it.
Yeah.
So the tooling is getting more complex. So the people should know how to work with it.
Yeah, but also then for these software vendors who create the software, and I think P6 you have the museum here in the Primaned Academy where we have floppy disk, and not everybody knows what a floppy disk is, but look at the save button of Microsoft Word and it looks exactly the same. This is also something where your software engineer or your software vendor should be looking for. Is the software you use right now in the academy still the best software, or see you changes in these training modules? And of course, because the software packages are changing.
Yes, we always use the best of breed. I think for scheduling, it's still the ones that we just named.
Yep.
Those are still the best of breed, and we use the data in any type of data warehousing or BI tooling, Power BI, or I think that is the best combination to make sure you have the best of breed in scheduling and the best of breed in showing the information actually.
Yeah.
But for instance, I talked about Oracle Primavera Cloud, which is something that is now getting better and better, and we're looking into that and making trainings and.
But that's something developed by a familiar company. Oracle Primavera as a business unit is familiar with scheduling. They probably have scheduling engines under the database structure. But Primavera Cloud means it's hosted probably somewhere at the Oracle Cloud basis in Europe. People are working more from home, so that should help them. I think working together in the same common data environment is a term you use. You hear a lot in the data scene. Is that also your planning engineer should be able to cope with that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think actually before Corona, the movement already started with the digitalization, the dashboards. The only difference now is that we are able to work from home and look at the same dashboard in a Teams meeting instead of in actually a meeting where you sit together on a table.
Yeah.
But I think the tooling and the field was already prepared for this. Luckily. Yeah. So we're already able to work remotely and being able to show interactive dashboards where people can just log in, look at the dashboards, maybe have a remote meeting and steer their projects. Yeah, because projects are also getting more complex and more international. We are having a new nuclear reactor in the Netherlands, where I think the contractor or the design engineer is from Argentina, and the financial experts some are different. So people are used to working together in the same
environment, whether it's in the office or digital. But I think the movement has set already. Mm-hmm. Okay, so coming back to so foundation is very important, and not just start playing with all the fancy buttons. Then a real good tooling training. That's, I think, where you mentioned the T-shaped professional. That's the top bar of your T, and then start specializing in tools or in techniques, or what flavors are there in the specialization?
So we have different specializations actually. For instance, cost, risk, claim, but also information, which is a very interesting one, where we focus on how to communicate the information. So using a meeting, a dashboard, which KPIs are you using? So it's a bit of a mix between a hard and a soft skill training. So you can specialize in the different fields. Risk, of course, it's about probabilistic planning, risk management. Mm-hmm. The cost is more focusing on the cost control and the earned value management.
Is that the same as the financial department?
No, actually, no. It's project cost control is something different than cost accounting. Yep. But in the training, we talk about the difference between those two and how to act, because every company that works with projects also has a department that's responsible for accounting, of course. But
so accounting is a profession. People can study the Bachelor of Business Administration or economics or whatever, multiple accounting educations. Mm-hmm. I heard you talk last session on one of the earlier episodes. There is no official training certification. There's no University of Project Controls. So how is the academy being formed to educate these planners at the end? And what's the profession of this training institute?
Well, I think what makes us strong is that, what I said, the trainers are also active in the field. So we make these standardized trainings about project cost control based upon 25 years of experience or more before I start working at Primanet.
Born.
But also from all the project engineers that are working on the field. So you have a lot of experience, and you keep updating your standardized materials. And then depending on your business case, on your maturity level, you can decide as a company, okay, am I going for an open registration course, in-house training, tailor-made, or maybe remote, because we also, with Corona, we were forced, of course, to give remote trainings. But it can also be very handy. Some companies, we give trainings worldwide, and then it saves a lot of cost if you
do this remotely.
If you do this remotely,
but you get the same training in I think in Philadelphia and in Hong Kong and in Amsterdam. If you give them the same training, it helps them in the standardization, of course.
Exactly. That's also part of the specific company that I'm talking about. Was really thinking about, okay, we want to standardize how we educate our project controls engineers, our project management organization. So let's just take one company that makes sure all people worldwide have the same basics for this T-shaped professional.
I think that's an interesting one, because in the further blog series we are going to announce and publish on the Head of Project Planning series, we are going to look into the details with internal and external and remote and dedicated, because there are pros and cons to different types of training, but we'll save that for a later webinar, maybe with one of the trainers and hopefully with one of the participants. That would be very great. So you have a standard approach, and you can change them to the organizational processes, for example, and you are improving it yourself, because is the methodology or the way of scheduling with are there new techniques, for example, in scheduling from a theoretical point of view? Is there something different than critical path, or are there more ways to roam, for example?
Well, for instance, the claim training. It's one of the specializations. Really goes into detail about forensic scheduling, about delay analysis techniques. So it's the same scheduling, the same critical path method. But then a whole different view on it. So how to prepare your claims and how to calculate what you can claim, how many days, and to prepare also for.
But that's also a process. I remember the story you told on a claim process with the dredging company, that you start your documentation way before you actually expect a claim. So it's also your internal process you need to prepare for.
Yeah, actually, the training is like 60% of the training is about preparation. To in the end, actually, the last few hours of the training, then you really go into the delay analysis techniques. Because if you don't register your events and your changes correctly, you can't even start calculating. That's, I think, also something we are going to dive into more deeply, the forensic planning, forensic scheduling, and I think it's even a change in claim culture is at least a spoiler alert. So please subscribe to the blog page on Primanet to see and listen, of course, to the PROCON podcast to see and hear about these stories. All right. Well, thank you very much, Stefan. You are one of the trainers. You are the manager. You oversee all these training institute. Any key takeaways? People need to, of course, read the blogs and listen to the webinar. But if they are going to start in the training field, any tips or tricks you need to start in? Well, I think. Most important one is to don't underestimate the power of the foundations. Because it's like a house. Without a foundation, the roof is not gonna last very long. People tend to think, okay, let's start with the tool training, and then we save 2 days of training. But in the end, you save much more when you have skilled people that know the language of project controls and actually know why things are happening, why it's important. Is it the old penny wise, pound foolish? If you forget the basics, at the end you will pay twice or triple the amount. All right. Well, thank you very much, Stefan Hollak, Manager Academy at Primanet. Thank you everybody for listening and watching this podcast. It's about the head of project planning series. Hopefully soon a next project meeting or a sales a project podcast or a sales software podcast. Sorry for that. So please subscribe and hope to see and hear you soon. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting proconpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to Primaned. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.